Right, so I'm going to get started. Just to say that this session is being recorded for the purposes of just making it more accessible for everyone, so that once we've done the session and everything, we'll put it up on the web page, the Make It Happen 2024 webpage, which has all the information there about the grant, just as a kind of tool that people can access. So whilst I'll be going through in a second everything about Make It Happen, the application process, the funding criteria. Hassan is going to speak a bit more about kind of the broader funding landscape out there and thinking about how to strengthen your bids when writing your applications and what to consider. My name's Toumazou. I am a programming manager at Waltham Forest Council. I work in the culture and destinations team. I'm fairly new. I started in at the end of November, and I'm helping to oversee the Make It Happen 2024 grants, along with my colleague Niamh, who will be joining us later to do a little bit of the presentation. So she'll introduce herself then. Um, and yeah, so I will be supporting successful applicants with their projects once we've announced the successful all of the successful applicants. Right, so just a little overview of a kind of workshop plan and everything. So introductions and stuff. Actually, I'll pass over to you, Hassan, because I haven't allowed you to introduce yourself.
No worries, I'll touch a bit on it.
Sorry, I'm just admitting people in.
Yeah, no worries.
Go on.
Striking image of my face. Back. Yeah, welcome everyone. I'll introduce a bit more about me very shortly when I have my little slot. So I'm Hassan Vawda. I'm a lifelong resident of Waltham Forest. I'm going to be speaking a bit about, as Lewis mentioned, the wider funding landscape out there, and actually what are the steps and what are some tips you can use to really develop your idea into a strong application. I'll be speaking about this from my own experience working as a practitioner and applying for successful grants at one point, but also speaking in my most recent professional experience, which is now working within the funding sector, within authorities and within organizations like the Arts Council England. So I'll be bringing a bit of my personal and professional and connection to Forest to something that will be helpful for everyone here.
Thanks, Hassan. Right, let's get on to the Make It Happen grants then. So Make It Happen has been running for more than over 3 years. They've been running in different iterations, and Hassan was a successful applicant, I think in like 2013 it might have been, but he'll get onto that in a little bit. And essentially it's our flagship project to program to fund creative and cultural grants across the borough. It's an opportunity to offer a seed funding to local organisations, businesses, creatives, all individuals and residents to do an incredible, interesting projects across the borough. This year, we're offering seed funding of £1,000 to £15,000 for new and cultural and creative projects in Waltham Forest between May 2024 is when the projects will begin to January 2025. We still have a few projects from 2023 that are continuing into this year, but we'll be finishing around kind of March, April time and everything. The main aim of Make It Happen is to celebrate the diversity of local communities and the creative talent that's across the borough. We're really emphasising with this year the importance of legacy and the need to demonstrate how applicants' projects can continue to grow after receiving Make It Happen investment. And the reason for that is we've had a lot of brilliant successful stories from organizations and past recipients and individuals that have been able to go from strength to strength each year after receiving their initial funding. Revel Puck Circus is a really good example of that. I believe they received funding from us in 2019 and now they're touring Europe. They continue to do incredible circus shows in the borough, and they're working with the council at the moment to find a permanent base and home for them to set up a circus school and do like regular performances. And there's loads of stories like that. And at the end of this presentation, or towards the end, we're going to have 2 presentations from previous successful recipients talking about their projects in previous years. And just to note that the deadline for applications is the 25th of February. Go to the next slide. So all of this information you can go into more depth with if you go onto our website and you click on the funding criteria and the funding guidelines, and it gives you loads of information there about everything that I'll be going through with you today. But the key funding criteria, the top one that I've mentioned there, is around legacy. So we want to see that your project has a long-lasting legacy. For example, a pilot project which continues a tour or further presentation of new work and the beginning of new creative venture. It could be that this is the first grant that you've applied for, which is the case for a lot of people, and it's just piloting a project, but it's a brilliant stepping stone to thinking about what you can do next. And what we're trying to do, both in this application process, but also for those successful applicants that come through, is really work with them to think about how can we ensure that there's a legacy towards this? How can you continue this project independent of our funding next year? And how can you expand it in some way? And thinking about supporting you with funding and sponsorships, just so that it isn't an ephemeral project that happens just for 1 year only. Social impact is always a big one. So yes, they're cultural and creative grants, but they need to go towards impacting neighbourhoods within Waltham Forest and communities there, whether that be around mental health well-being, around sustainability, environmental issues, food waste, food poverty, whatever it might be. It needs to have some sort of social impact aspect. Diversity inclusion. So your project needs to platform different perspectives and backgrounds. We're committed to invest in projects from applicants from diverse backgrounds, which I'll get into in a minute. Also looking at a local economic impact. So how does your project support other local businesses, creatives and residents? You can work with organisations and creatives outside the borough, but we would prefer that you prioritise those within the borough and that you support them in some way. So whether that being them getting paid through your project, but also thinking about if you're working with local businesses, what is, again, the legacy of your project with them? Is it that you're bringing in a new customer base towards them? What is that kind of long economic impact? And a really important one that will make like your application stand out is around creativity and ambition. We want to see and we want to fund projects that we haven't funded before, that look at things in a really unique way, work with a group that some of the projects that we previously funded might not have worked with before. And I think that's a real big one, and probably why you're applying as well, hopefully, to think about something really ambitious. And whilst it's seed funding, so you can't go wild, you can't necessarily organize a massive festival, you could work towards that, and we want to see that reflected in your application. So start off small and think big, but also think about what is that big impact of the small project in the immediate sense. So we're especially interested in projects that are led by people that identify as either Black, Asian, from minority ethnic groups in the UK, Eastern European communities, refugees, asylum seekers, deaf, disabled, neurodivergent as well, or LGBTQI. We also are interested in projects that are taking place in neighbourhoods which are in underrepresented areas within the council's own cultural kind of programme. So thinking about Chingford, Hyams Hill, Leighton, Leytonstone, the reason we do that is because often these areas get very much overlooked when it comes to funding and when it comes to kind of cultural programming, and residents often they often complain about the frustrations of things being more so Walthamstow-centric, and this is a brilliant opportunity for us to expand outwards. That's not to say that we don't fund projects that are happening in Walthamstow. It's just saying that we are prioritising those that are outside of it, and you can have a project that's happening inside of Walthamstow, but perhaps think about how you can bring in communities from those different neighbourhoods outside of Walthamstow itself. Also, we're prioritising, I mean, especially interested in projects that are celebrating the rich diversity and heritage of the borough by bringing local communities and people with different backgrounds together. And I think that's a really important one. Whilst yes, we funded projects, and we really are interested in funding projects which work with underrepresented communities. How can you also bring different communities together to kind of learn from one another as a kind of local cultural exchange? Examples of creative projects that could include, this is by no way an exhaustive or extensive list, but events and festivals, new artwork shows, public art, film, digital work, pop-up projects, activations or vacant or underused spaces, creative skills, training, career projects, learning, educational, creative workshops. That is one that you might want to think about. How do I embed some sort of kind of learning and skills development within my project, if that's not necessarily at the core of it, but it could be an aspect of it. And then anything creative which aligns with our guidance. And I'm sure, like I said, that's not an extensive list, and there's a lot of other kind of mediums that you might be thinking of exploring that we're open to funding. In terms of the assessment, applications can be made via the online application form, which we encourage people to do. But if you have an access need, or you don't feel comfortable doing the application form, then you can submit it in any other format. That might be a video, it can be an in-person interview as well. And that's just to make sure that it's accessible for all people, basically. And also, if you need a PDF version of the application form, which is, again, you can find that on our website on the Make It Happen 2024 webpage. I can send you a PDF version for you to look at. All applications will be marked against the funding criteria outlined in the application guidance pack. And with that, when it comes to the actual assessment of it, we have we have a community selection panel made up of 5 diverse individuals who are all past recipients of Make It Happen or creative funding from the council before. And they are from different areas within the borough. They're going to be receiving training around unconscious bias, the whole selection process, what to consider there. And they're going to be making the final selection, a kind of short list of who will go through. A long list will be made by Niamh and I, just because on previous years, we receive up to like 150 applications. So we do need to sieve through those. And again, they're going to be marked against the funding criteria and everything. But that more in-depth look at the long listed projects will be done by the community selection panel. And there'll be a negotiation process through there to make sure that the successful kind of cohort is spread out across the borough, that everything's a bit different in many different ways. So don't feel underwhelmed if your application isn't selected for this year's funding. There's other funding opportunities out there, and also you could have a brilliant application, but it just might be very similar to someone else's, and it might not quite hit the mark of exactly what we want. And at the end of this presentation, I'll be sharing the slides with you, but also a long list of loads of different funding opportunities in London, but also across the borough to think about. So this is also a brilliant stepping stone for you to learn about bid writing, making applications, creative grants. And just by doing that, even if you're not successful, is really helpful. In terms of eligibility, we're welcoming applications from anyone, including individuals and organizations. So that can be individual practitioners that are freelance, artists, creative collectives, community and arts organizations, residents associations and charities, limited companies, CICs, but no profit can be made from this project itself if you are coming as a limited company. And if there is, we need to look at the kind of the profit margins, and schools and colleges, further education as well. And this timeline is on the website, so I don't need to go through it too much, but that just gives you a bit of an overview. And like I said, the main deadline to just consider and be aware of is that applications close on the 25th of February. So I'm going to pass over to Hassan now, and he is going to yeah, just kind of run through the overall landscape of arts, culture and heritage funding in London and across the UK.
Thanks, Lewis, and thanks everyone for joining this session this evening. When it comes to arts funding, no matter if you are completely new, have applied before, or have a lot of experience in it, there's still lots to be done to make things feel a bit more accessible, and lots that are still that feels a bit opaque and uncertain to even those who are familiar. So don't feel so if you've never applied for a grant before, that unfamiliarness that will always be around. So this part of the evening session is going to give a bit of a wider perspective on thinking about developing an idea into a stage that it's ready to apply for arts funding from the public sector. So it's relevant to applying for Make It Happen grant, but also thinking about applying for other grants that are up there. Some tips that will that can take your idea into a stage that it's ready for to be placed into a strong funding application. Just to remind yourself on who I am and why I'm speaking about this. So I'm Hassan Vawda, as I mentioned at the beginning, long resident of Waltham Forest, still live here, but I've worked extensively in arts and culture and heritage sector as a practitioner. Then I've worked for organizations that have received public funding, and most recently working for organizations and public bodies that distribute the funding, like the Greater London Authority and currently the Arts Council. But I'm not here representing any of the organizations that I've worked with or currently work with. I'm here speaking from my own experiences, both personal and professional, to give some guidance that can hopefully give a bit of support and helps everyone listening in this evening with Make It Happen or thinking about wider grants out there. I also received my first arts grant ever from Waltham Forest, as Lewis mentioned at the beginning, probably one of the first early iterations of Make It Happen 10 years ago. And I received like an initial startup grant for an idea I had. And it was running free art, like almost a free art school in Leytonstone and Chingford libraries. And that old grainy picture from 10 years ago on an iPhone 1 is from that initial project. But why I signpost that is, as what Lewis mentioned around, particularly in this iteration of Make It Happen, this real idea of legacy and how projects can grow even beyond an initial funding. When I received that grant 10 years ago, looking back on it, I learned a lot from that experience as well, because once the money and the funding, the initial funding for that project ran out, I wasn't able to take it to the next stage. And that's something I'd want to touch upon in this session as well, just starting to almost think about those steps of how to develop your idea or how to develop a project even into future stages, even at this early stage before you've even received your initial funding or your kickstart to get the project growing. So I'll first give a quick overview. I'm going to cover three quick things in this session. I'm going to give a quick overview of the landscape of arts and heritage funding, just to really stress how important it is to really develop an idea before you think to apply for funding. Then I'll speak on some key steps to take your idea into a stage where it can be developed into a strong funding application, some tips that I've developed both from my personal and professional experiences. Then finally, just going to explore that point I was just referencing about my own experience in that project, is some key points to consider even at this stage in how you can grow a project into different phases and even beyond an initial funding application. But that kind of thinking, starting it now, even in this, weaving it into the early stages of the idea, is really important. So I'll just jump to slide 2. So yeah, so first up is just outlining what's out there and what we're talking about when we're thinking public funding for the arts, culture and heritage. So we mean funding streams that are connected to the public sector, either as parts of government or as arm's length bodies to government. it's important to be aware that this means the priorities of funding can shift, or new funding can be made available around specific policy initiatives within government. The levelling up agenda, for example, is a really like a recent example of how like policy shifts can happen where funding priorities change, etc. And which would have real tangible impacts to London, for example, which we're working within here, where arts funding has left London to be distributed more equitably across England. So we have first like arm's length bodies, which are independent from government as organisations, but connected through them to governance and finance. And these are like the Arts Council, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, English Heritage, etc., etc. And these arm's length bodies have an independence. They have their own vision, and they have their own very strong remit, but they also have influence from these kind of central government policy shifts and guidance. Then you have local authority and regional authority funding, and Make It Happen sits within that. So local authorities like Waltham Forest is a great, and the Make It Happen grant is an example of this. And in London, the regional authority that you could look to for funding would be the Greater London Authority. These are, I would say, even more dependent on political and policy-driven spaces that kind of initiate programs, projects, and initiatives. And I'm mentioning this, which will come up again very shortly. So just hold on to that if you think, oh, this is zooming out way too much. It will connect, and when we zoom back in. And just to think about that example of like political and policy-driven specific programs, if you think about like the GLA, for example, when I worked there, I worked on a fund called Untold Stories, which was about diverse heritage in public spaces. And that was very much a public funding for arts and heritage that was unlocked by the mayors, by a specific mayoral policy about making public realm more diverse. And if there was another mayor, it would be another fund with perhaps a completely different focus. That would be one of the streams. So just that kind of thinking about public funding and the kind of things that motivate the application process, the funding criteria, etc. Then I won't cover it too much today, but just it is a signpost for everyone thinking about ideas. There's also public funding to be accessed through higher education research bodies like the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and they're mainly administered through university, through university departments in research projects. But I won't cover it today, but I know after this session, everyone will receive a kind of like a signpost to various options of different funds to consider, and perhaps go a bit more detail there, but I'll just slight touch upon it there. So slide 3. Now, why I've mentioned all of that, and when to just lay the land and set the tone for the landscape, is that here's a chart which, and I'm not bringing this in to make people feel nihilistic or make people feel that it's the landscape is really hard, but what we're in a moment where arts funding and arts, culture, and heritage funding is coming after decades of really great work around thinking about access, inclusion, and diversity, something that 30, 40 years ago, many communities, many experiences were not being represented, were not being invested in within the cultural sector from the public purse of the country. And lots of progress has been made where that kind of, when the doors have been open and so many more experiences have been invited to these funds have been shaped to be more accessible. But whilst all funders are communicating that grants are accessible and inclusive to everyone, that everyone with a creative idea should feel they need to apply, or they feel they have a path to apply, the pot hasn't grown accordingly. So the door is open and everyone's invited, but the pot hasn't grown. And even in recent years, the last 10 years, and this chart shows that since 2010 to now, it's about £1.5 billion less funding in the arts across all public sector, arm's length bodies, local authorities, regional authorities. So it has gone down, but saying that, £3.3 billion investing in arts and heritage is still a substantial amount, but losing that is also substantial. So that's not, and I'm not highlighting this to again to make people feel like it's a tough and harsh landscape. Why I'm bringing this in is that it's so important to really think and develop your idea before you get to that application stage, because it is so competitive, because more applications are coming in sometimes than ever before, but the pot isn't growing bigger. So just signposting the landscape of the public arts and cultural sector for the importance of really spending some time to develop your idea before you apply for any funds. So next slide. So what do I mean when, by developing your idea? Well, here's 3 key points that I've kind of fine-tuned that from the perspectives, personal and professional, from assessing applications, from writing applications and receiving funding as well. These are kind of like these are 4 points that I've kind of sussed out that that I would say really would help to just workshop an idea into a stage where it's ready to be placed into a strong funding application. Because there are many great ideas that happen with many people, many creatives, many organizations, many communities, but to take that idea and putting it and framing it in something that gives confidence to those administrating public funds, for it to give confidence to be assessed alongside funding criteria, due to the landscape, due to the stress on the landscape of arts and culture funding, there is a level that you need to work to bring that idea up to before applying. So next slide. So I'm going to talk through these 4 points just in quite broad fashions. So first point is framing your idea succinctly. And there's many application that has come in that I've looked at, etc., or even in past, perhaps unsuccessful applications that I've submitted and learnt through rejection, as many in the field have, is that narrative is so important about, and more important than ever, about these projects and in terms of developing your idea, to really have like a clear narrative thread of the aims, the objectives, and the themes of your project. And I've come across many applications that I could see a great project there, but it's hard to take the narrative out of it. It's hard to summarize it down into a single like articulate and clear essence. So I would really think about this point of framing your idea succinctly. Think about if you can just, as an exercise, boil it down. Can you describe the essence of your project in 1 sentence? And is there one overall outcome that the project focuses on achieving? And just really drawing that out. And in any application you do, that first sentence to be this one summarizing sentence that has this overarching theme that anyone assessing it can go, okay, this is the primary theme that this project is aiming to deliver. So next is clarity in budget and timeline. And this is thinking about the methodology of budgeting. So, and also timelines. So this is thinking around, again, also connecting to the narrative. So thinking about when you're budgeting, if you often people think when they're around these applications that there is one strong, this is how to do a budget. If I'm delivering a festival, if I'm delivering a series of workshops, is this a good budget, or is this a good budget? And I would say a good budget is one that connects to the narrative of your project. So if you cost it and you can show a reason why you've costed it like this, that's a good budget. So it isn't about saying that this is like a universally good way of developing a budget, or this is a universally good way of what a budget looks like. A budget will look, the strongest budget is one that has a rationale behind it and is connected to the narrative of your budget. And a key point, thing that kind of sometimes to make you think about it tangibly, and also something that I've noticed that a few applications, or many applications that I've looked at trips up on, is thinking about in the narrative, it like really commits to co-creating. It really commits to engagement. So this project is going to work with these communities to deliver this this artwork, this festival, etc. But then when it comes to budget, it's not budgeted there, and how you're going to engage. What's the resource you've allocated to do that engagement work? What's the resource you've allocated to co-create? And again, that's the point to make, is to really connect the narrative to the budget, and same with the timelines, making sure it's connected to the aims and the core outcomes that you're looking for in the initial narrative. And in terms of feasibility, all of those budgets and timelines, having a strong methodology on both increases that confidence of feasibility. But a great insight or tip to think about when, just to give that concreteness on feasibility, is if you can, even for yourselves as an exercise, just think about 1, 2, or if you can, 3 risks and how you would mitigate that. If you include that somewhere in your application, in any of these pots of funding, that always increases the confidence from those assessing it, saying that those who are applying have thought about and have identified the possibilities of where things might not work, or where risks may occur, and these are the things that they've thought about how they mitigate it. So even just that act of mitigating risks really increases the confidence of feasibility. And the next is identifying and building relevant partnerships. And I know the first two might have been quite obvious, but this one I find this real deep thought about partnerships often sometimes it gets more overlooked than not. So when I mean by partnerships, it's, are you clear about who your audiences and participants are? Have you identified the partnerships you would need to deliver your project? And can you explain the way you'll develop and build these partnerships? And one of the what I mean when I say it's often overlooked is that sometimes you may not include or signpost partnerships because you feel that you haven't agreed them or you haven't confirmed them. But it's really, really, really beneficial to even just signpost potential partnerships, to convey that you know and you are aware and you have identified the partners that you would need to deliver this project. So if you think of thinking about partnerships and an application within the arts and cultural landscape, a standard would be identifying the partners that you would need to deliver this project. So in the application, you've identified them. A silver would be you're in discussion. You can note that you're in discussion with XYZ partners. And a gold would be you've discussed and you've agreed partnerships. But a standard is important to even include. So if you haven't agreed partnerships, signpost that you're in discussions. If you haven't even started the discussions, still signpost that you've identified which partners it is that you're going to work. And these partnerships again include, particularly if you're thinking about working with communities, etc., This is a real key one that if you reference you're going to do community engagement, you have to include it, how you're budgeting it, and how you're connecting to the partnerships that would produce real, equitable, relational, significant work to bring those communities into your project. But also partnerships can also be in-kind funding, for example, match funding, for example. And if you're in that gold standard, and if you have agreed and you have agreements of funding that you've received, or you have in principle received, a letter of support will always go a long way with any application you're doing. Even if you apply for Make It Happen and you are successful in this grant, already start thinking about you can use that as a letter of support to apply for other grants as well, and vice versa. If you're applying to Make It Happen and you've already in conversation or have some agreements confirmed, bring those letters of support into the application. And then the final point, and again, this connects to the core of the landscape in terms of everyone is invited to apply, but the pot isn't getting bigger. And also that idea of particularly local authority or regional authority grants that are sometimes connected to real policy initiatives or connected specifically to real political moments, to be boldly specific in your application. So there are many grants where the funding criteria is there, but someone might be those that applying reading it. One of the key things that would be present in the assessor's mind is, does this application, does it convey a project that only our grant can fund? Because there's often times where it might be a really good application, but that it might feel a bit too generic or might feel a bit too broad in terms of an arts application. Does it connect to this specific grant, and how? Is there one line in it that you can almost say, this can only be, this connects this project to this specific grant? So really do spend some time looking at the guidance document for the funds you're applying and find that key criteria that you can weave into your application, that you can have a sentence at the beginning and at the end where an assessor can read it and say, yep, this project only in the way it's framed can only be funded by this grant. And it's not about going, it's a great project, but it's more so we can recommend XYZ funder to pick it up. So next grant. So finally, so that's developing your idea into a coherent stage where I would say you can put together quite a strong funding application if you have those four things really bottomed out. Now to just think about three things to think about even at this stage, even in this idea stage, developing your idea into a proposal, to even think about in the next iteration. So weaving in things to consider to take this project, so it's not just contained, to think about its legacy, to think about where it can go, to think about what further funding you can bring in. So the first thing is maybe quite obvious, but it's very important to just start building into the foundations of turning your idea into a proposal. And that's just breaking it up into phases. Have your phase one, have your phase two, and have your phase three. And this could even with value be weaved into the narrative of your funding application, where you can highlight that this initial stage is phase one. And after we achieve this, we aim to do phase two with the ambition of phase three. So that's just a really simple but key way to just think about having those ambitions and weaving that into the narratives of your initial funding applications to note, to signpost that you have thought and considered this legacy work. Next is to think about evaluation as you go. So that would be to if you say, for example, Make It Happen grant or another initial grant that you've given, the data that you're going to generate, the audience numbers, the workshops, the activity, all of this, think about a way of capturing this and budget this, even in your initial application or your initial trial of this project or this first phase. Think about how you're capturing it and how you're going to visualize it, how you're going to frame it, and how you're going to package it, because this will act as your platform for that phase 2, or to bring in the different funds that you can get to take it, to let the project to have life beyond that initial investment. And then the third one, again, going back to being boldly specific, and thinking about start mapping now different pathways for framing your project. As I mentioned, there are many, that idea of being boldly specific is increasingly more significant, as I mentioned, the invitation to apply being wider, but the pot must being smaller. So just have different pathways to start thinking about, what does your project look like framed in a heritage pathway? What does it look like being framed in a visual arts pathway? What does it look like being framed in a community engagement pathway? It just gives you, starts opening up your project and your program for different that emerge from the different spaces that we've discussed. And then final slide. Now, I'm just going to conclude with a key advice for first-time applicants, but for anyone really, particularly doing a project that perhaps a pilot project or a seed project or a project that you want to grow to the next stage, and that is plan and deliver to scale. And that is particularly, I find, really important to articulate and to communicate to those particularly working on projects and initiatives that are outside dominant cultures, that have been excluded for so long, that have been 30, 40 years ago, would never even been thought about within the funding landscape, because of those, because it's been excluded from the spaces for so long. I've noticed many applications that come in from outside of dominant cultures bring in everything and are so generous with trying to contribute and trying to really do these projects and these initiatives and these creative, incredible creative moments, and really developing them, but have for so long have had to fight against the system, or have found it really hard to get those things funded. And when you finally do, you bring everything into it, and then it almost goes beyond the resource, goes beyond the way to make a project sustainable. So just really to think about less is more, plan and deliver to scale, and think about in your project, in your initial project applications, to think about at least setting aside 15 to 20% of that budget on planning and development and evaluation for that next iteration. So I'm just going to conclude it there, because I know there's a few others.
Thank you, Hassan. I'm going to
helpful for everyone.
See if I can stop sharing my screen, because we should have a chat function. Does anyone have any questions just about, from both my presentation before about Make It Happen, or any questions for Hassan? Please put them in the chat function, and then we can, we got like 10 minutes until we go on to the next presentation. So let me know. I've got one in already from Angela, just asking if you'll be able to watch it on replay. Yeah, we're recording it. So basically, after the session, I'm going to upload it to the Make It Happen 2024 webpage on the council website, and then it will be a resource that everyone can view. Got one from Kyle here. Can you enter multiple bids for different ideas? For Make It Happen, and I would say, and Hassan can jump in on this, but I would say just enter one. If you're going to be the lead for a single project, an application, just enter one and focus on that. It might be that you are a partner on another application that's being made. And if that's the case, then that is okay if you're not the lead person with the application, but focus on one project idea. And it also means that you're giving that as much consideration as possible. And if you have multiple ideas as well, I'm sure those other ideas might be more applicable to some other funding. So we're having a few others roll in now. Got one here. Can you include development costs? I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean by development costs. Hassan, would you know what might be referred to there?
Development costs, I mean, I'm going to take it as perhaps like core funding costs, like costs to develop your organization or to build capacity within it to deliver the project you're doing. I would say for project grants and a program like Make It Happen, really sculpt it around the project that you're delivering. But if you identify, and again, I go back to the power of narrative, if you can identify that this is the capacity you need to deliver this specific project, you can include that in your bid. But again, it has to, if it's framed as just general development costs for the organization delivering it, that will
that's not going to be applicable.
Exactly. But if you can say this is a capacity, this is a resourcing, this is a mechanism we need to deliver this project, then that's all good.
I got another good one actually from Sam here that's like, do you have to have a radically new idea? So e.g., we have an idea that's happening already, but we want funding to make this happen. This is a local mending group. What I'd say, Sam, is yes, and if it's a program that you've already run, great, but think about how you can expand it and make it a bit different. It's not just about continuing stuff. What we want to fund is new ideas and new projects. So that might be something that you're already doing, but it might be thinking about how can you work with a different group that you don't usually work with? How can you work with another area of the borough? And important to that is the legacy as well. So what is that doing for you by working in another area of the borough? What new partnerships are you creating there? And how is that helping you or your organisation with the expansion of the mending group? And maybe just thinking about, being able to create a different project from this mending group that might be one of the main outcomes of it. So just think about how you can tweak it quite a bit, because if it was just going towards a project that already exists and a program and there's no difference there, then it's unlikely that you're going to receive funding. From Tate, really useful in general in project managing funding. Thanks, Hassan. Question, how important is it to secure the match funding? So we have put, I believe, I haven't got it right in front of me, but in our application guidelines, we've said try to produce 20% match funding. Now, what that could be, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be getting a sponsorship or another fund that will go towards match funding for us. It could also be in-kind support, and Niamh is going to touch on that a little bit in the presentation as well, but that could go around discounts that you might get from working with certain organizations, some voluntary time. I'm not saying that you should, but any voluntary time that you or anyone else is committing to it, that cuts on like staffing costs. other kind of costs that might be discounted because you've worked with a specific organization or business quite a bit. So match funding doesn't need to be another grant that you need to secure. It can be a whole host of different things. And we're saying aim for what I believe is 20%. We've only got another 5 minutes. Sorry, go on, Hassan.
No, I was going to say on that, one of the key match funding in-kind support that often gets used but overlooked, that you might not think it is space, and using space and space hire. That's like a real significant in-kind support within arts culture, whether it, but also shows a real solid partnership has been built. So for example, if you're working with a community or community center and you're using their space for, and they've been welcomed, and you're using space for meetings and workshops or connections, that is in-kind support. That can be articulated in kind support, and the conversation of how important it is, it just heightens and it just strengthens that idea that a real meaningful partnerships are being built, and so it just gives confidence in the application. Just remember thinking about standard is signposting partnerships and match funding. Silver is you're in discussions but hasn't been confirmed, and gold is things have been confirmed and you've got letters of support. But if you haven't got that, the standard is you always aim to that.
Yeah. I'm going to try and go through these quite quickly. So on the application form, it asks for the details of one organisation. Is it okay to include 2 organisations? Yeah, you can, but we just need a lead organisation there. It might be an equal split of a collaboration between 2 organisations, 2 groups, whatever. And that's fine. It can be 3, it can be 4. And we encourage collaboration and stuff, but we need a lead organisation and a lead contact to work with. Tate is asked, and how would you define what legacy is? Legacy can be something, it can be anything around the lasting impact that the project has on individuals, but more importantly, what we want to see in terms of legacy is the continuation. So the consideration of, like Hassan was saying, phase 1, you get the project funding, brilliant. Phase 2, how could this be turned into something else? How can you start considering some of the sponsorships, partnerships, and other things that you've been developing? How can that help you to run the project independent of Make It Happen funding and in another year? A third phase could be like, how could you upscale this into something even bigger? So I was speaking with someone in a drop-in session today around a photography project, and we were asking about the outcome that they had, and she was mentioning an exhibition, but then mentioning, well, we couldn't get with the 15k funding to do this, but she wanted to maybe think about how she could blow up these pictures of community members and put them onto like public spaces, which costs quite a lot of money, but that is something that you could strive towards. So that kind of legacy plan and the different phases is important to highlight. What else? Can an idea submitted in previous Make It Happen years be submitted this year? Yeah, with improvements, that's all fine. It's just making sure, like, look at the funding criteria and make sure it matches up to that and what we're really looking for. It's absolutely fine to like kind of submit it, but maybe just think about it should naturally change a little bit because of the funding criteria that you need to meet and how it's a bit different. And then finally, from Felicity, further to Kyle's question, can time spent working on the project be included in the... Yes. So we want to see that any kind of lead organization, any individual that is working on a project, that they are paying themselves fairly for that. But it needs to add up to the actual project itself. So if you've got the full 15k and then you're paying yourself 9k for running the project, then the bulk isn't actually going to the project itself and the outcomes and the objectives and meeting that kind of social impact. We need to make sure that it's that it kind of weighs up, basically. But do make sure that you pay yourself fairly. And also, I think it's on the website. If not, I will share it with everyone through these slides. Look at like fair artist pay. So the Arts Council have a page on that. Artists Union, England do. There's also a music body as well that talks about like fair play for musicians and stuff, and we really want to see that highlighted, because otherwise it will go against your application if you're saying you're going to pay an artist £10 an hour, you know, to be delivering some really specialized brilliant work. Okay, I'm gonna pass over now to Niamh. Let me just make her a presenter. Bear with me. She can introduce herself and we'll get on to her presentation. Niamh, are you with us? Yes.
Hello. Yeah, do you want me to share screen?
I'll share it because
okay, cool.
I'll be getting up the others. Let me just.
Perfect. That's great. Hello, everyone. I'm Niamh. I'm Lewis's colleague. I am also a programming manager at Waltham Forest Council. I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes about partnerships and collaboration, touch on in-kind as well. So that comes some of the questions that you guys have been asking, I think. So first of all, just to say that partnerships and collaboration, as you can imagine, are all about relationships. So some of the things I'd encourage you to think about at the grant application stage are sitting down and thinking about the things that you can offer potential sponsors and more commercial partners. So we call these things sponsor benefits. They might be things like branding in certain places, attendance to certain events, introductions or access to particular kind of organizations. And then think about who you know within your project group. Who do you know in different businesses and organizations, and think about those degrees of separations. You might not know someone personally, but you might know someone who does. So you start to think about the types of sponsors that you might want to approach. You can kind of map out who you might know, and getting a personal introduction for these kinds of relationships does always help. It's not essential, but it often can make it quicker to get in touch with the right person. And as Lewis will have said, Make It Happen is seed funding. So think about keeping those relationships beyond a one-off project. And you might want to think about scaling them. So how you start small maybe, but then you might ask for more support, more money in phase 2, phase 3 that Hassan's been talking about. So think about keeping them for the long term and how you can build. And that comes to my last bullet point there, which is knowing your worth. Don't over offer for too little support, too little financial support or other types of support. Make sure you kind of keep something in the kitty, because it means that you can offer more, or you can ask for larger amounts of money further down the line. And what I would suggest is being really clear at all stages with a sponsor, especially commercial sponsors, putting in writing what you've agreed. For smaller amounts, that might just be over email and making sure that you have that in writing. But for bigger amounts of money, I'd suggest having an agreement or a contract. And there are some good templates online for charities, voluntary groups that we can send some links to after the session. If I can have the next slide, Lewis. Yeah, so I think we're going to just think about a few different types of partnerships and collaborations, one being sponsors and commercial partners. So with this, it's really important, just the same as it is with the grant funder, to think about that sweet spot of where your project fits what they do and what they want. And sometimes that might be motivated by the values and the meaning in the project and how it aligns with a particular brand or what a business does, what their DNA is. And in other cases, it's a bit more transactional. So it might be more commercial reasons, something that you're doing reaches an audience that that business wants to access, so a potential customer or user. In terms of pitching to sponsors and commercial partners, I think have an even shorter attention span than the funding applications. So it's often a really short email as an approach. You might meet someone in person and then follow up quickly on an email. And then if they're interested, you're often invited to submit a short deck. So I think the next slide, I'll talk through what you might include in that deck. But just in terms of a few kind of pointers and things to think about within negotiating with sponsors and commercial partners. They can sometimes negotiate add-ons after a main agreement, so you can you kind of set your boundaries. They can be a bit cheeky sometimes, so don't be pushed beyond your capacity in terms of adding more and more and more to what you offer them. If they're asking for more and more and more, ask for more money. And likewise, this is, obviously it's your project, it's a creative cultural project, so you shouldn't be pushed to become like a brand activation. Be upfront from the outset about maintaining your artistic and creative freedom, your editorial freedom. You're the creative, so you're not there providing a service to a sponsor or commercial partner. They're there supporting your project. And one little tip about for larger companies, thinking about when to approach them for funds. Often the beginning of the financial year or the end of the financial year, if they have money that they're sort of have kept by for these sorts of sponsorships and trying to allocate, those are good times to be in contact. You also need to think about relationship management, so planning in some time to the money that you ask. If it's a bigger sponsorship, it's more money to kind of holding the hands of the sponsor a bit. If they're coming to an event, making sure there's a dedicated person in your team to take them round, introduce them to artists and participants. So just plan for that also in your own costs. If I can have the next slide. Great. So this I'll just run through very quickly, but this is a kind of rough structure of what you might include in a pitch deck to a commercial sponsor or partner. I'd keep it really clear. 5 clear slides is much better than sort of a 10-page document. Make it visual, invite discussion and questions, because giving a sense of ownership to the sponsor and them feeling involved and motivated can really help as well. While obviously, as I said, you don't want them to overstep into your creative ideas. I think, there can be some discussion and negotiation about different levels of support and different types of benefits that you can offer. You might assume that what they want is kind of branding, but actually what they want is being able to network. So make sure you leave a little bit of openness for discussion, but being really clear about the ask in terms of what kind of support you need and what you can offer in return. Next slide, please. Okay, and then Hassan has spoken about public funding and institutional funding, but there's other types of grant funders that you might be interested to look at for your project, and these are mainly trusts and foundations. They can be more stable than sponsors because they'll set out clear terms and conditions and their sort of grant period, but sometimes small trusts and foundations have very few staff. They can be quite difficult to get in contact with, and they might only have one funding round a year or 2 funding rounds a year. So definitely look at their timescales, because they vary massively, trusts and foundations, in scales and the amount that they award. But you can often find that a really good fit with your sort of specialist discipline or the thing that you're looking to do, the communities that you're looking to work with. So an example might be looking at guilds and companies who often have trusts and foundations associated with them. So an example would be something like the Worshipful Company of Drapers and Weavers that would support textile projects. But you also have trusts and foundations that are set up to benefit specific communities. So getting that fit right, as with any funding, is really important. It's worth saying that with larger scale grants, you often need to demonstrate that you have experience of grant management. So it's the same often with public funding. That's why people like Arts Council might have an under £30,000 project fund and then over. You have to show that you've got the ability to kind of manage those finances. So for the larger scale trusts and foundations, people like Esme Fervin and Paul Hamlin, they will have eligibility criteria about you having received grants of a certain scale before, which is where things like Make It Happen and match funding can be really helpful, because you can demonstrate that you're already a recipient of a grant of a certain level. There are some really helpful funding databases for trusts and foundations, so we'll pop you those as well alongside when we share the slides and the recording. Yeah, I would say also really check the eligibility around these types of grant funders, because some of them only fund registered charities and CICs. And the last thing you want to do is spend a lot of time putting together a really great application to find that you're then ineligible. So make sure you check those if you're looking at these types of funders. Okay, next slide, please.
Just to say, we only have a few more minutes on this, Niamh, but then, yeah.
I've got 2 slides, I think, and I'll
that's
go
fine.
through them very quick.
Yeah.
So on earned income, this is just thinking about what you might actually sell to generate income. It might be ticketing, you might have fees for services. Say you're developing a creative education project and you're going to charge fees to go to schools, that sort of thing. And this is often really helpful to think about in terms of diversifying your funding when you're scaling your project. So definitely think about if there are things that are monetizable. Obviously, you may be wanting to work with, a free to participants model. So we don't necessarily encourage you to think about that you have to ticket, but it's worth thinking about where you can have earned income within your project. And then next slide. And the last thing, I think both Lewis and Hassan have mentioned this, is don't undervalue your in-kind support. Collaborators and supporters might not be giving you cash funds, but they could be giving you support that massively reduces your costs. Space being a really good example, provides you with networks, deepens your impact, or gives you a really great profile or reputation. Say you're working with a local gallery and they have a really good reputation and great marketing list. It's going to encourage other sponsors and supporters to maybe want to get on board as well. So definitely don't underestimate that. Include it in your budget, as I'm sure Lewis has said, at an estimate, and think about what kind of support you need. So I've mentioned specifically in-kind support can be really beneficial to marketing and promotion, like to reach the audiences that you want to reach or reach the participants you want to get involved. Yeah, I think that's me.
Thanks, Niamh.
Pop any questions in the chat and I'll answer them as we carry on.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. So our next speaker is going to be Simon. Let me just get him up so I can make him a presenter. Simon. You should be with us, Simon. So if you just turn on your screen, there we go.
Hello.
Okay. Hey, I'm just going to share my screen and then.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you all fine.
Yeah, thanks.
Right.
So hi, my name is Simon. I'm an artist from Leytonstone. And yeah, my project was about bringing together the LGBTQ+ community of Leytonstone to create a celebratory quilt banner. And also another important aim was to bring together people from different backgrounds, ages, from different walks of life, to socialize, become friends and share our stories. This is because I found that in Leytonstone, basically there are not many opportunities or events or places for the queer community. So I thought that this project would bring some activity for this community. So what I've created was a 6 weeks project. So once a week we would meet up in Stone Mini Market, which has a community room in the back room, which has 4 sewing machines and also a big room where we could all meet and create this big banner. And this happened in 6 weeks between September and October 2023. So next slide, please. So part of the inspiration for this project comes from the LGBTQ+ history, in particular from the 1980s and 90s HIV commemoration quilts. when many, particularly gay men, died of HIV. And so a way to commemorate them was to create these quilt banners. And also part of the inspiration comes from the Black and other minority groups, particularly from the US, that they use a lot quilting as a way to tell the stories and to speak about the community. And in particular, I was fascinated by Rosalie Tompkins, who has been defined as a radical quilter, who used to create these amazing, a bit wonky quilts made from different kind of fabrics that she used to find. And so now her quilts are in some of the most prestigious American museums. So this is part of the inspiration, and also part of the inspiration is from my art practice, because oh sorry, at the time I have just finished a PhD in fine arts, and part of my project was about queering the landscape. So this project was basically a sort of spin-off from my research, really, or part of it. Next slide, please. So what we did, basically each participant had a fabric panel, and basically what I asked each participant to do is to create in the panel to show and celebrate their lives in the borough. So they could do anything they wanted, but as long as it was celebratory of their lives or of the borough. And so basically all the materials were provided, and we used fabric pens, fabric paint, markers, or image transfer techniques, or simply fabric stitching to create different stories in different panels. And we also work together in some panels to create more a sense of community and to have fun together, really. And at Stone Mini Market, they also sell drinks. So we, every time we met, we had a chance to have a drink and have a chat. Some people brought biscuits or cakes. So it was really a fun activity. And it was really great to meet all these people. Next slide, please. So in these two pictures, for example, this is the sewing room of Stone Mini Market. And it's a very multifunctional space. So sometimes we had a big table, sometimes smaller tables. And also Stone Mini Market has a lot of fabric that's been donated to them, and a lot of buttons and other things. So basically it's got a real haberdashery. So on top of the material that I could provide and I budgeted for, we also had a lot of free material we could use. So that was really great, a great space for this kind of project. Next one, please. And in this slide, instead, we could see that it was at the end, nearly at the end of the workshop, where we all worked together to put all these different panels, stitch all them together. And yeah, there was even a dog, so it was really a sort of a community affair. And yeah, we even had a little final celebration, and we had a little party at the end. So yeah, next slide, please. And these are three examples of different panels that were created. So many panels had a kind of a forest theme, and probably because we live in Waltham Forest. But some instead had a real, I mean, they used different techniques. So some people used words created with fabric. Some others, in the example there with the dog, for example, they used a mop, a cleaning mop, to create this dog. So I thought people were really creative, and I was really astonished by the level of creativity of everybody. Next one, please. And instead, in this slide, basically we were deciding where to put all the different panels. so we were playing around with all the panels, and yeah, so as you can see, somebody decided to create a panel with a black swan that was spotted in Leytonstone during the pandemic. Some others decided to put something about the place they live. So it was, all the panels were different, but overall together they worked very well, I believe. Next one, please. And this is the end result. So yeah, as you can see, there is a stuffed bear together with some another panel with some braille. So it's the final quilt banner is quite big. It's 2 meters something by 2 meters. I mean, it's not very precise measures, but it's quite big. And yeah, it was a real fun things to do, and we really enjoyed it. And if you go to the next slide, please. Well, as we were, saying before, the legacy of this project is that we have created and fostered a new community in Leytonstone. And because it was so successful, we decided to continue meeting in the new year, and new members have joined. So in these pictures, for example, was the last day of the workshop. And unfortunately, some people couldn't come, so it's not all of us, but it's mostly most of us. And I believe also Stone Mini Market had some benefits, because some of the people, for example, of the group, they didn't even know about it, so they spending 6 weeks there, so they basically became acquainted with the business, and Stone Mini Market started to create new relationships with the community. And also some of the people of the group are thinking of running some workshops there. So I think it's beneficial. It's been beneficial both for us and for the business, for Stone Mini Market. And finally, the banner itself has been shown at Stone Mini Market for 2 months. And now in February is going to Stratford Library, where I'm gonna also create a little workshop for Pride Month. So overall, it's been really, really good, and I'm happy that it will continue during the year. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I'm gonna I'll just stop sharing my screen quickly. Just to see if anyone has any questions for Simon about his project. You can put in the chat. While we're waiting, if anyone does have any, I just wanted to say, like, it's such a lovely project, Simon, and I think what was so great by including you in this, not just because you're a previous recipient from last year, but it's not a project that is necessarily engaging hundreds of people. And I think we get a lot of applications that overcommit to saying, yeah, we're going to get an audience of 1,000 people. And it's like, great. But what you did is you identified a gap within Leytonstone, like a lack of safe spaces for the queer community there. And you did something that was real high impact, that has a legacy. And I think it's a really great example of, whilst yes, the outcome was a quilt, you've taught people new skills, you've engaged them in a business and supported that local business, and there's an ongoing legacy to it. So anyone who's maybe on this call and is a creative thinking about a project to do, I think Simon's a really good example of a brilliant project to run. We've got a question here from Kai, who asked, he says, well done, Simon, great project. Was the space given to you in kind?
No, I decided to give a donation. So in my budget, straight away from the beginning, I decided to give a donation to Stone Mini Market, but I met them a couple of times and they agreed, and we talked about the space, what we could use. And they also, Adrian, who runs Stone Mini Market, also suggested an expert I could invite, because I mean, I know a bit about sewing and all that, but it's not my main practice as an artist. So I thought of inviting also an expert, and so the venue was also helpful in that respect. So it was really a collaboration, and yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. So there's just two others here that if anyone does have any more questions, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move on to Mervin for the next presentation. But from Tate, how would you advise on project outputs specifically for audience numbers, Simon?
From for project outputs, well, I don't know. I don't think it's so important to have a specific output. I mean, I decided to make a quilt because there is a queer history to it, and also it was something good to do together, something to make together, and to create a sense of community. But yeah, I think it can also be more conceptual, perhaps, or it doesn't have to be an object. I believe, but that's at least what what I think. As long as there is something that you're creating, like a new sense of community or new skills that you want to share with people, or yeah, I don't think that an object is fundamental.
And maybe for audience numbers, I think, like I was saying before, if your project is it's about the really focusing on the quality of the social impact that you have for a specific group. It doesn't have to be massive numbers. It can be 7, it can be 6, it can be 10, but it's about what is that impact, and looking at the legacy of that as well. Like what are those participants kind of gaining from that? And just quickly, last one from Valerie, did you purchase the sewing machines with the grant?
I managed to find a venue with already 4 sewing machines.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to. So I think it's also important to find a venue that is strategically good in that respect. So
yeah, and we have had questions about this before. Like inevitably you're going to have some sort of equipment costs and stuff, but when it comes, like, sewing machines can be pretty expensive. If you were to get a sewing machine or multiple, then it's thinking about how you can donate that to an organization that can continue to use it. But again, we don't want to see in your budget like the majority of the funding going towards just equipment and expensive equipment. It needs to go towards the project itself and the output. Okay, I'm going to get Mervin quickly because we haven't got too long, but we'll if the meeting goes over slightly, there's no problem with that. All right, so I've just made you a presenter, Mervin. If you want to share your screen, your video. Yes. Hello, Mervin. Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Just gonna share my screen so I can get the slides up, and then you can start. Right. There you are, Mervin.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share our Make It Happen experience. So this is just showing the cover of who we are. I chair, well, my name is Mervin Caesar John, and I chair the Waltham Forest Antigua and Barbuda and Dominica Twinning Association. In short, we call ourselves the Twinning Association, Waltham Forest Twinning Association. Next slide, please. So this organization was created. It started because the first African Caribbean mayor of Waltham Forest was born in Dominica in the Caribbean, and he became the mayor in 1991. His wife was also of Dominican and Antiguan parentage, and so they wanted to form a legacy, and they had organized some educational and cultural trips to the islands, that's in Antigua, Barbuda and Dominica, for local children of Waltham Forest. That was in collaboration with the Council's Racial Equality Unit. But they decided that they wanted, as I said, to leave a legacy. So they set about twinning the Waltham Forest with Antigua and Barbuda and Dominica. So the charters were completed was signed in April 1999. And this year we're celebrating 25 years of the organization. One of the things that was agreed is that each mayor of Waltham Forest would be the patron of the Twinning Association, and that has continued ever since. The association's objectives are to promote friendship, information exchange, and mutual understanding of the linked areas, cultural, recreational, and commercial activities. Next slide, please. So in 2022, well, 2021 really, we had ideas of having some creative writing workshops. We had already done one at Waltham at the William Morris Gallery, but we also had previous experience of providing these creative writing workshops. So we decided that we wanted to expand our previous creative writing workshops to offer performance and publication opportunities. So back in July 2021, our creative writing workshop at William Morris Gallery, that was funded from a community chest grant that we got in 2019 from the William Morris Big Local. I don't know if you know of this grant, but those workshops, obviously looking at the timing, was delayed due to the COVID pandemic. So in the end, we had it in July 2021. The workshop in 2021 resulted in requests for more. Therefore, the William Morris Gallery were willing to collaborate with us, thus the application for the Make It Happen grant. What we wanted to do was to keep things simple. So we just wanted to collaborate with William Morris Gallery because they were going to provide the funding, the premises for us to have the workshops. What we did, we inquired about funding for the facilitator, and we were told in December 2021 about the Make It Happen grants. We had a very, very tight deadline to complete the application. So we just put heads down and just got on with it. We looked closely at the guidelines and devised the program accordingly. A draft of the overall plan was submitted to the Twinning Association's Management Committee and the facilitator for them to review the project. The costs, we calculated all the costs, and there we completed the budget and the application. Can I have the next slide, please? So, meetings, definitely, so that everybody within the team were on board. We wanted to make sure that everybody was agreed. As you know, that's the way we do our make our decisions and carry on with our plans. So as an organization, we had to make sure that all the processes were documented, and we needed to keep an eye on the budget as the, you know, to make sure that everything was done. So anyway, we were successful, and as the project continued, as I said, we had to keep an eye on the budget. We had to liaise with our funders. We had to give regular reports so that they could release the grants, because that was done on on a phased basis. So once we received the application, we had to set the ball rolling. So in addition to, you must be aware that also when you submit the application, various things are required of you. For example, what previous projects that you've delivered, which are relevant to this, possibly, that to show that you're capable of delivering these projects. We had to submit supporting documents, including policies, such as insurance, safeguarding, etc. So be mindful of that and make sure that you are aware. But you can get some assistance from the council to produce those if you don't have the experience or the knowledge about that. So we needed to publicize the project. So for the workshop, a poster, we produced a poster and emailed that through our network. We posted on Facebook and Twitter, through WhatsApp, all the platforms, and through our website as well. Waltham Forest also, and William Morris Gallery, they also helped with promoting it on Twitter. We notified our network about these were the workshops. And we had 5 workshops, monthly workshop, who started in April. So anyway, these were, just bear with me for a second. Yeah. Yes. So challenges that we encountered. So there was a slight delay at the start because the processes that Waltham Forest of processing the documentation by Waltham Forest took a bit longer than we had anticipated, but we started the process, the workshops in April, and we had the monthly, except August, where the association itself takes a break. So April, May, June, July, and then September. We had planned one in September to correspond with our performance that we had, because the project itself was in 3 phases. There were the workshops, and then a performance so that the writers could perform their pieces, and then an anthology. So we were hoping to have the performance in September, but because that was the mourning period for the Queen, we ended up having it on the 1st of October. And that was the first day of the Black History Month in October 2022. So we were also were very, very busy. We had an increased workload during October, November because of Black History Month. And so where we wanted to complete the anthology in December, we ended up doing that in March. So the anthology is a compilation which was completed, which I had to complete, I think, while I was on holiday in the Caribbean. No complaints about that. Therefore, the difference in time zones created some challenges when liaising with the designers. However, we were able, can I have slide 6, please? We were able to, so there you go. We had 4 creative writing workshops in April to July, 1 workshop rehearsal for the performance. The anthology was published and delivered on 20th of March, and we had a book launch at the William Morris Gallery on the 25th of March. All those workshops and events took place at William Morris Gallery, and we had an additional town hall launch on the 14th of July in 2023. So this is, if can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So these are all projected outcomes against our actual outcomes. I'm mindful of the time, so I don't want to. Is that okay, Tom?
That's
Lewis?
fine. Don't worry. Don't worry, Mervin. Yeah, continue as you like.
So what we had some very good feedback from the people who participated and who attended our events. As you can see, it created an opportunity for residents from different backgrounds to socialize and connect. Participants were mainly Black, British, Caribbean, but there were also some white residents. They said they felt welcomed within a friendly and fun group. I won't read the other two because I want people to have any questions. And this is our book that we completed. Okay. So yes, thank you very much. In fact, the mayor who attended our events, she said that the performance event and another event at the Fellowship Square, she referred to the performance event as being the best one she has attended in all her years as a councillor. So I don't know about that, but it was quite enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mervin. That was lovely. I just had a question about the anthology, like the printed version. Are there still copies that people can collect? And if so, where?
Yes. In fact, we are one of the 4 piloted groups, community groups, who have a community in residence at William Morris Gallery, and our first event is going to be on Saturday. And so when we have within our program, we're going to have these available for sale, and it's only a £5.
So, lovely. What's the event?
So we're having, it's called Tea and Chat. Chat as in culture, heritage, and traditions. So we're going to have that over a cup of tea and bun and cheese, etc. We're inviting families to come on Saturday, but we want them to register to the Twilling Association's email address between 12 and 4 on this Saturday, the 3rd of February. But we're going to have other things. We will be telling people more, and you will hear more about our program because it's going to be over a few months. We're going to have various items, not just tea and chat. We're going to have various creative items going on there in culture.
Okay, well, everyone get to that then. This Saturday.
Yes.
I've actually got a comment just to mention Eileen Rose, who says she was fortunate to be one of the writers. Never done anything like this before. It was amazing. Can't believe my poetry was published. Thanks again. Does anyone
so much, Eileen.
Does anyone have any questions for Mervin before we close off the session? Just pop them in the chat if you do. While we're waiting for any questions, just to say, like I've said at the start, this session's been recorded, so we're going to put it up on the website. It can be used as a resource, again, not just for Make It Happen, but also for any other funding opportunities that you want to find, because what Hassan and Niamh ran through, and myself as well, is applicable to all kind of applications that you make for creative, cultural, heritage grants. And with that, we'll share the slides with you via an email, but also a list of some of the funders in London and nationally that you can apply for. I haven't got any questions through, but when I send this email through, hopefully tomorrow, you'll have my own email, and you can throw me any questions. You can also ask questions at the culture@walthamforest.gov.uk email, which is on our website, the Make It Happen 2024 webpage. But I hope everyone found it really useful. And if you are putting through applications with us, the best of luck. I have got 3 more drop-in sessions which I'm doing, and I'm encouraging anyone to come along to those. They are taking place in libraries across the borough, and I've ran 3 of them with Niamh already, and it's just an opportunity for people to come along with an idea, speak to us about their ideas, and then we can talk about how to strengthen your application and your project so that it stands the best chance of getting through and being successful for Make It Happen, but also future funding. But those drop-in session dates are tomorrow at Higham Hill Library, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Leytonstone Library on this Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Walthamstow Library Tuesday, 6th of February, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I'm going to try and organise one more at Lee Bridge Library because that'll be the only library we haven't attended yet. So yeah, again, those details, they're on the website. But thank you everyone for attending and have a lovely evening. See ya.